Welcome to MSP Unplugged Tech Talk Tuesday on a Monday. I'm your host, Rick Smith. This is the place to learn tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow and run your IT service business. Whether you're a one-person shop or leading a team for the journey, this is the place for you. Let me introduce my co-host, someone who needs no introduction no matter what day of the month it is, Mr. Paco Lebron. How are you today, sir?
Better than good, better than most, as I like to say nowadays. Apologize for those tuning in. Had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we made it through from the amazing team here over at the Acronis Cyber Studio.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. Yeah, we're things are a little different for us today. You may notice it looks a little different. We are at the Acronis Cyber Fit Summit 2022 at the Fontainebleau Hotel in Miami, Florida. So we want to give a big shout out and thank you to Acronis for having us here. Now, our guest today is Dioly Alexandre. He is the founder and CEO of Black Shield Cyber Inc. Dioly, how are you today, my friend?
Doing great. It's been a great day. I love it here in Miami.
Yeah, it's been good. It's been good. Rained a little bit, but we're doing good. But I'm glad to have you here, man. We appreciate you coming in, stopping in. Good. As you all know, we this is our Tech Talk Tuesday where we speak to someone in the industry that we, can get to know, learn a little bit more about their business and what they're doing and how they do it, to give us a little bit more ideas on how, some ideas on how we may be able to take something back and grow our business with it. So with that, before we talk about business itself, Dioly, give us a little bit of background on you and how you came to found your company.
Yeah, so a little bit of background on me. I was originally born in Haiti. Actually, I moved to America when I was 5 years old, about the time when computers were just getting into people's houses en masse. So got my hands on a computer pretty early on, and I was always the oddball out, being from a different culture and everything like that. So I ended up getting more into computers, and at first it was just gaming and being online or whatever. I was on some of the first early chats and Yahoo IM and early multiplayer games and all that fun stuff. But I got really interested in how the back end of that stuff worked. So one thing led to another, and I ended up getting into hacking. My first crack was my school district's entire library system in South Carolina. Yeah,
at least it wasn't the grades, right?
Yeah, no, it wasn't the grades. It was the library, actually. And a quick story about that. They gave me a fee on a book that, to this day, I swear I was not late on. So, and because when they gave me that fee, I couldn't, check out any other books until I paid that fee. But I was afraid to tell my dad about it because I knew he'd be, pissed. We didn't have a lot of money, right? So I knew he'd be, pretty upset that I got a library fee, and because I couldn't check out any books, I had to do a little project, and I couldn't check out any books, so I ended up failing the project because I couldn't get books. And so I figured, well, if I can't get books, nobody can. So, and I just shut the whole thing down, and that was a good time. But yeah, so after that, I got breaking into other more school districts and stuff like that, and then kind of graduated out to targeting companies, and then stopped for a while and started realizing pretty quickly that, hey, it shouldn't be this easy for me to do this kind of stuff. And going into high school, I kind of decided that cybersecurity was the way that I was going to go. I figured it'd be a little bit better if I made it a career instead of a rap sheet. So, I worked for, I graduated and worked in private contracting for a while. So I've worked for a lot of three-letter acronyms and some stuff overseas, and then came back and realized, well, this is a space that's going to need some growth, and I understood it from a unique aspect, and so I founded Black Shield Cyber, and we are a critical infrastructure, cyber warfare defense, and compliance management company. We work with the 16 critical industries as defined by the Department of Homeland Security, small to medium enterprise space to be specific. So banks, hospitals, logistics companies, chemical, all the stuff that makes the world go round. That's what we work with. We're out of Phoenix, Arizona, and we're here at this event now. It's been awesome.
Oh, that's cool, man. It's a great story. It's definitely interesting how we get to where we are today, and a lot of times it's falling in or having the need, to learn something, to figure it out, and then we grow from there. And I think it's great. So tell us a little bit about basically what you guys do.
Yeah, so like I said, critical infrastructure. The big thing about us is that we specifically work with customers that have to follow federal and state level compliances. So everything we do is from that framework. So we provide penetration testing. Internally, we call it persistent resiliency testing because we developed a kind of more proprietary methodology of doing that. But we also do more of the less traditional stuff like the overall compliance management. Forensics analysis is something we're rolling out into 2023, so we can actually provide legal hold type forensics analyses, so expert testimony in court and all that fun stuff. Again, all within that framework of compliances. We're also rolling out formal SOC services as well in 2023. But currently, we do a lot of insurance reviews. Disaster recovery is a big part of our business as well. Just total business failure type disaster recoveries from cyber attacks. And that's where that cyber warfare aspect comes in, because we're often coming into situations where there is still an attack going on and we have to combat that.
Okay. So you wouldn't necessarily classify you guys, or would you? I don't want to put words in. Would you classify yourself as an MSP, or is it more of a how would you classify?
Yeah, honestly, even I wish I had a good marketing one-liner for you for that, right? But I really don't. With 2023 and our rollout of our full SOC type services, we are going to have a lot of the DNA, of an MSSP. But we really were started as a pure cyber hacking response type company, right? Because of my background and just the nature of our business, we really started in that really pure kind of background. And so regardless, I think, of the direction we go, that's always going to stay in our nature, and that's something that we're always going to hold close.
Okay.
So, I want to dive into a little bit more because, I think a lot of people really think about cybersecurity on a security aspect, right? Mm-hmm. And the conversation is security and compliance are two different things, although important to each other. But yes, you've actually just listed quite a bit of things that some managed service providers, managed security service providers are trying to understand, trying to get to. And really, the topic for today is how do we have a solutions provider be a cybersecurity first solution provider? And so, from your experience, kind of going through that journey, what was kind of either the event, just your view of the landscape of what made you think like, okay, compliance is really the direction I need to do, but just as a broad general topic,
sure,
how should managed services providers really look at cybersecurity as a whole and kind of move forward?
Well, so cybersecurity from the perspective of managed service providers has always, I think, been looked at as kind of another stack of services to offer, right? And I mean, it is in a sense, right? It makes sense, right? Offer cybersecurity, because if nothing else, your clients will ask for it.
Sure.
But when you get into the space of cybersecurity, and especially in compliance, you open up the can of worms that is compliance, right? And again, we focus on what's called critical infrastructure, those companies that have to follow certain type compliances. We work only primarily in the private sector, small to medium enterprise. So 50 to 2,000 employee type companies. Most of our clients are between 250 to 500 employee size, though. So big enough that they have things to lose,
sure,
quite honestly, but not big enough that you're going to see a CISO or full SOC center or something like that. So in dealing with that, MSPs should understand that cybersecurity and compliance is a different animal than the overall IT management of a company. Mm-hmm. And the best way that we've kind of figured out to explain that is there's general surgery and then there's the specialties, right? Mm-hmm. No one will ever knock a general surgeon for being a general surgeon,
sure,
right? But that's the vast majority of MSPs. But we are the brain surgeons. We focus on a very particular area that plays a very particular important role. And oftentimes, as we know in the medical field, we work together, right? It's not a me versus you thing. You don't lose out as a general surgeon because I have to do a brain surgery, right? Oftentimes it's coming from you and we're working on this together. So MSPs need to understand that. Cybersecurity is not adversarial to IT. And compliance is is its own animal, because compliance then gets you into the federal and state laws, and that's where you asked about, what event kind of made us get to this. It was the rapid changing and expansion of federal and state laws around cybersecurity and user privacy, coupled with COVID.
Gotcha.
So the feds, for the last decade or so, we just had a great keynote by the former director of the FBI, and I think he made some incredible points there. They've been figuring this out for about the last decade as far as the actual legislation that they should bring down about cybersecurity. And states have been following suit. And even internationally, like GDPR, we see that they're following suit as well. But those laws are constantly changing and being updated, and oftentimes it's in response to new technologies and new methodologies and new vulnerabilities and cases and so forth. There's so much going on into that space. And so as a company, we started getting asked more and more, hey, are we following compliance in this? What kind of exposure do we have? And ironically, we started to get inquiries from the general counsel of other companies. So not their IT department, but their lawyers were calling us and being like, hey, this breach happened 6 months ago. What's our exposure? And then, you look into these laws and what they mean from a technical perspective. You've got things like notification clauses. So, for example, you have to notify your clients if you, and this is a good kind of point here, you have to notify your clients if you believe there's been a breach. You have to perform a forensics analysis if you believe there's been a breach. Clients don't understand that, right? So they think, I haven't been hacked. Well, do you think you might have? Like, the moment one of you guys acknowledge that something might have gone wrong, there's a whole legal precedence that has been set as to things that you have to carry out. So that's number one. We realize that MSPs and end clients did not understand how any of that works. So that we really took the time to understand that and put resources in place to do that. And COVID happened. COVID, obviously, the economy constricted significantly, right? And historically, when an economy constricts, IT is the first place that they cut costs, historically. Well, this is the first time that not only could they not cut costs in IT, but organizations had to drastically expand their IT infrastructure to deal with the remote work life that we now have. Well, for the first 3 months of COVID, we had absolutely no business because everyone was running around with their heads cut off. And then once we kind of settled down and everybody was everywhere and they kind of realized this is how the world works now, everybody realized they got hacked because hackers didn't stop.
Right.
So that's the two big catalysts that have kind of blown us up as a company into the position that we are now.
Gotcha. So there's a lot to unpack on what you just said, right? And that's great, because this is what I kind of try and do to drive the actual lessons to the audience, right?
Sure.
And so the first part is on that security and compliance, right? Where the managed service provider, the solutions provider, there was a time where you did IT management and then you didn't want to do security.
Right.
But now we've gone into an age where you have to be relevant and stay true to your customer, right? And to your client. And so being that point, like for me, I was like, not touching it, not going to bother with it, never going to be a thing. And as things started to creep up, now there was more understanding and more education in the space of what it means, right? And then it was saying there were so many more vendors making it understandably easier to either adopt a tool, be educated on what they're doing. Because I think, like you just mentioned earlier, is like, IT providers think, okay, stack of tools, slap it together, put a price tag, and shipped it off without really understanding what they're doing and understanding that.
And also what they're taking responsibility for.
100%.
And it is probably one of the reasons why you saw when we finally started to get some kind of understanding, clarity, you start to see a lot of MSPs pull away from doing medical because of HIPAA.
Yes.
Because we didn't understand. We didn't know what we didn't know.
Right.
And so with the education and kind of going through, it got to the point where there is no, and Matt Lee jokes around on this, where he says there is no such thing as MSSP, because in the government, when they rolled out all that infrastructure, it's managed service providers are responsible for the security of the data that they touch for a client.
Yep.
So the interesting part of all that is that you have to deal with security and compliance regardless, no matter where you are.
Now, here's the really, I'm sorry. Here's the really funny part, right? MSPs are kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we do recognize that because, yes, if you're an MSP, if you're just trying to be a general IT provider, you have no choice but to get dragged into the security conversation. You 100%. Can't operate without that conversation happening. And from a business perspective, you can't just throw your hands up. A customer can't say, "Hey, we need security help," and you're like, "I don't know." So, right? So MSPs have to say something, right? And so that's what you have is the industry kind of spreading out and go, okay, well, as you said, slapping it together. Okay, let's get the antivirus, let's get the firewalls, and we can throw in more buzzwords. Let's get the AI and the machine learning and the dashboard and all that fun stuff. Yep. But as I mentioned before, they don't realize what they're taking responsibility for, right? And so, and the ironically, the same federal laws that you talk about that say that MSPs are now also responsible for the security of their clients also say that it's a conflict of interest for that same MSP to take care of the security compliance of the client. Yep. So it puts them in a really, really strange place, right? Because if you're managing the IT infrastructure of a company and you then go and manage the security of the company, you've already violated virtually the base of all the compliance stacks. So you can be HIPAA compliant on top of it, but if something happens, and I know, and we always consider everything, the end all be all is in the court of law, right? Because that's really the end all be all is the courtroom. Right. When it gets down to the courtroom, the question becomes, who did your IT? ABC IT providers. Who managed the antivirus, firewalls, and other security infrastructure? ABC IT providers. Who did the forensics analysis when the cyber attack occurred? ABC IT providers. So we have that's not going to fly. It's not going to fly, and everyone up and down the stack is going to get held accountable at that point. It gets messy.
Right, and then in the second piece, and I'll toss it over to Rick, is that you mentioned how COVID, the shelter in place, really just tossed the whole industry in its head. You mentioned obviously that businesses had to try and scale up and figure out what was going on, and then after X amount of months they got hacked. But same with the IT providers, right? They had to actually figure out what they were going to do, and they had to scale out. So for myself, and we just had this conversation before we went on the show, that you mentioned that story, but I didn't add on to mine, where I actually ran my business myself for the 7 years until COVID, and then I had to rapidly expand to be able to really focus and adhere to, one, business operations, but two, making sure I had eyes to set and make sure everybody's going to be in a good spot. Sure. So I actually ended up hyper growing until about 8 employees within a matter of it was 6 to 12 months at that point. Yeah. And so then that's their own additional labor of trying to figure out. But it's amazing on how now we're in a different landscape on trying to be, again, a cybersecurity first solution provider and understanding on what that means in the long term. So for you, Rick, when you hear that term, obviously being cybersecurity first, what comes to mind for you, not only for your customer or your client, but as for a managed service provider yourself?
Well, it's kind of twofold, right? We think about it this way. When we think cybersecurity first, first word cybersecurity means is protection, right? Right. Protect your clients from their data being hacked, protect your clients. But really, we have to protect their clients from themselves. Right.
Really, that's an awkward conversation.
But because the truth of the matter is, and I'll use a simple example as two-factor authentication. It's probably one of the simple first steps we can use towards at least help to protect data, right? Help to protect, places where data is stored. And because of that 15 seconds of inconvenience for a client, it makes it hard for them to do it, right? So this is when we say, again, we have to protect them from ourselves. Right. Protect them from themselves, right? Now, for me as a cybersecurity first, I'm thinking, okay, all of the ways, and I don't know them all, but all of the ways that my customer can be exposed, right? Because now that puts me on the hook, right? I'm saying I assume responsibility for this, which is going to lead me to a question for you. But,
we're going to keep them coming.
Send it.
But, our conversation has really broadened my thoughts on some things. But, so my thoughts on this is, hey, first thing I got to do is try to, let's plug the holes. Let's start with the simple first, right? These are the simple things we can do. And then we start moving forward and forward and forward in advance. And it's important, and I say this all the time on the show, we have to bring our customers along with us. They have to understand what we're doing. They don't have to know the ins and outs and the technical understanding, but they have to understand the importance of why we're emphasizing it. It's not just another tool we want to add or another price we want to charge them. There are reasons that we are doing this. So that is where I always go back to relationships, right? I refuse to do business with people that don't trust me.
Sure.
I don't trust them. You know, you do business with people you know, like, and trust. And if we can't come to that understanding, that doesn't always mean we're going to agree.
Right.
But, you know, I don't always agree with the things my doctor tells me to do. But the doctor's the expert. I have to take their word for it and move forward with it. But, you know, that is, you know, my, making a short story long, thought pattern on, you know, what I'm thinking about when I think security first. But my question to you, Dioly, as we're talking about this and that fine line between, you know, that security that you do and what we provide, what is the, you know, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to, what is the solution for that? How do we bridge that gap between your side of it and our side of it?
Yeah, so the first thing I think is changing the MSP mindset around security as not an adversarial thing, as not something that gets in the way. That's a common problem that we encountered in the beginning. You know, we figured out how to get around this now, but in the beginning we'd come into an environment and, you know, we'd talk to their IT and they'd go, oh, no, we got this. Because the idea is that they immediately think that we're going to come in and replace them, right? So, and the same thing is true dealing with MSP is that, you know, they think we're coming in to replace them, and I tell them, I don't care about Nancy's password changes. Like, you do that. I want you to handle changing Nancy's password for the third time today. But what I want to figure out is why her password has changed for the third time today. And that's the big difference. You know, working with clients across the board, it's more clients are more complicated than ever, and I want to touch on the whole COVID thing too, because infrastructure and the digital footprint of businesses expanded significantly. You know, you could have a company that used to just operate in one area and all their employees were in Phoenix, Arizona, and that's where they all are, and that's where the headquarters is. And so my network was this building, or at least I knew tangibly where my network was, and all the assets were mine, and I knew where everything was. You had now people going home and BYOB. Right. You know, they're bringing their own, or BYOD. BYOB would be later. Yeah, that kind of gave me away there. BYOD, right? They're bringing their own devices. I mean, like, we had situations where companies were, and this was, some of it was in effect to meet government standards, ironically. You had people getting sent home, and, you know, between the logistics, the whole logistics hiccups that happened, being told, look, we don't have computers. We don't have enough computers, laptops to send you all home with. So get on at your house, on your computer, on your home network, and then remote back into our network and do that. And so, and do your work, right? And access confidential company data and access, you know, and at the same time, you got your private Netflix and whatever else going on in the other screen. So it created an environment that was very messy for IT, very decentralized, very messy, all over the place. Understanding that security is not the adversary is a good place to start. At the end of the day, everybody wins if we're doing our jobs and you're doing your job, right? The idea is that nothing happens, right? Nothing really goes awry and things just happen smoothly. And for us, the best relationships that we have is relationships with our IT partners, because at this point, 80% of our business comes from IT partners, ironically. The best relationship is where we can kind of sit the client in the middle of us and just manage it back and forth, and the client simply gets the solution of a effective IT environment and a secure environment. That's kind of the ultimate end goal, right? And the second thing that I would say is that understanding that long-term development of security is something that's never going to stop. Right, it's never gonna. This is only getting more out of control, and the federal government and the state governments are only going to keep adding more regulations on top of it and making it more complicated to do. So the risk for everyone involved is going to rise as a result of that. And so being able to clearly understand where those risks are and how we can mitigate that with each other is going to be very important. And that's going to take open communications on an even playing field between MSP and security experts on our end.
No, so I mean, we shared about on obviously how to bridge that gap, right, and trying to figure out how to really come together and get to a point where we can go and get to that point. So again, I go back to the term cybersecurity first, right? And being able to go, everyone, and we've talked to many security experts, but, now we want to go ahead and dive into the compliance part, right? Because a lot of people, the two are so separate. What made you, I know you mentioned as far as the laws, and you could have gone both ways with how you wanted to drive your business.
Sure.
What about compliance attracts you to be able to say, okay, this is such a need that I know I can go ahead and take care of that and educate others to do so? What kind of had you go into that realm and pick that niche to
Because just because you're compliant, it doesn't mean you're actually safe. Yeah, you can be compliant and not safe.
Yep.
We see that all the time. We did a survey a couple years ago of a couple hundred businesses that we had done business with over the years prior, on it, both currently and prior. 97%, basically all of them, said that they answered yes to, do you believe that you follow your industry necessary compliances? Virtually all of them said yes. Our actual data in-house, though, shows that that number is something in the ballpark of like 27%.
Wow.
And it's still about that.
Okay.
It's still about the same. Yeah. So when we're going into environments, so basically everybody believes they're good, and virtually nobody is. That's a dangerous place to be.
Now, is that
Right.
because they just assume because they are checking those boxes, or is it just they don't know what they don't know?
They don't know what they don't know.
Okay.
And that's the thing. They really don't know what they don't know. So let me give you a perfect example of this. We had a customer that did construction, and they did a lot of federal projects. Okay, so state and federal type projects. They were a mom and pop shop, nothing crazy. They accidentally sent a $120,000 check, thinking they were purchasing construction material, to whoever they sent it to. That money's gone. They wire transferred it. It's gone. It's not getting back. There's nothing we can do about that. They went through the channel of notifying the FBI and so forth and so forth. But again, at this scale, there's nothing really anybody can do, right? Well, what they didn't do was a proper chain of notification, because when we came in and we said, okay, what's the story? We had reason to believe that it wasn't just a ransomware, because of the information that was used to convince them to send that wire transfer. We believed that they were actually already breached. So someone was sitting in their emails, watching the communications back and forth, so that they could make the right references and the right, the right nomenclatures and so forth and so forth. So they've already been breached. They work on federal contracts. So there's a very stringent aspect to it, because from the federal's perspective, they see it as, we don't know where this money went. So for all we know, it could have gone to terrorism. It could have gone to, well, it did go to crime. It was a crime that had happened, right? So there's a whole host of things that have to happen as a result of that, to both clear your name as the business as much as possible, but to also figure out where responsibility stops. We're talking about then their end clients. We're talking about all of their end customers. And, in the meeting, the first thing they said to me was, we thought something was awry a couple months ago. I said, yeah, why is that? They go, well, because our customers reached out to us and said that they were getting emails that they thought from us, but they were able to catch it. So I'm like, wait a minute. You're telling me that was 3 months ago? So it's they really don't know. So their customers might have been breached as a result of theirs, because they're telling me that their customers got emails, opened them up, and said, "Oh, this looks fishy," which is good. But were there malware packages in those emails? I mean, so there's so much that opens up that they just simply don't know what they don't know. But they had their antivirus, they had a cloud backup, they had firewall, they had all that stuff. So yeah.
Well, no, I just think that's interesting, because something similar happened to a client of mine, not on a $120,000 scale, but on the fact that, and the only reason they knew was because the client called them, and they sent an invoice to a client with the instructions to where to send the money, how to pay. Another email came right behind and said, hey, we've changed some things. Instead of sending the money here, wire the money here.
Yeah.
Right? So, and the client was ready to do it, set it up and everything. And the only reason it didn't happen, he happened to call the company said, hey, we got your second email, so we changed everything and we're sending the
Right.
message. The person who took the call was diligent enough to be like, wait a minute, what second email? I only sent one email. And, that's
So it's
how
luck
got
that
caught.
they even called the
It's luck,
person
right.
who even sent the email, because if they had like multiple invoice people, they would have been like, okay, I guess somebody sent
Exactly,
an email.
right. She would have been like, okay, yeah, sure, okay, send it. So he calls, and this is not someone that was this is a client now, right? We've done some small work for them.
Sure.
And this is people you recommend, hey, you should do this, you should do that. Yeah. Then he calls us, hey, do you know anything about email security? Do you know how to...
That's how you know something happened.
You get real specific about, hey, dude,
That's oddly specific.
But again, it's interesting because everyone thinks, again, I could do it myself. I can put Microsoft 365 on a computer, add everybody's email, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
But, it's not that simple. It goes back to, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
For us, there's still things, like I say, that I guess is maybe 2-3 years ago was that big move for MSPs to move away from medical because of HIPAA, because we started to, rumor spread, and that there's still really no clarity on this, but rumor spread that, hey, anything that happens, it's your fault, the government's coming after you. So everyone kind of panicked and was like, I'm not doing medical anymore. As we got more information, we learned it's a little more sophisticated than that. But still, it's like, it's, again, we have to, it's hard enough as an MSP, and I'm just going to say it this way, it's so much we have to pay attention to.
Sure.
And it goes back to what you're saying, is sometimes there is a way to share the burden, to share, and be willing to admit what you don't know or what you don't understand.
Well, so like you touched on, for example, the government kind of coming down on you, right? Usually the government only comes down on the really, really big cases, right? But what the government is really good at doing is they create an environment where maybe they don't come down on you because they're like, we don't have the time to deal with every single one of them. There's just too many of them. But we'll create an environment where other people can come down on you. So it kind of holds you accountable from a litigation standpoint. And that's also what is really scary. So, for example, most states have effectively a victim rights aspect to breaches. If you get breached and your client data gets disclosed, those are now considered victims.
Right.
And so as victims of a crime, they have a right to be notified, they have a right to be kept up to date, they have a right to be given a chance for repercussions. And that's where things get scary, because you have to notify them of that. Mm-hmm. So you basically, I tell people, send out the email, then call your lawyer. Actually, no, I'm so sorry. Call your lawyer.
and then
Right. Call your lawyer, have him yell at you for a bit. They'll put together an email, send that out, then have your lawyer call their lawyer, because there's going to be a lawsuit coming. And that's what the feds did. That's what, and the state laws too. That's what they kind of effectively did with the way that they changed the laws. Let me give you a really practical example, right? For the longest time, we had a hot potato situation going on with breaches, where a client gets breached, consumers would try to come back, and I'm just talking end consumers here. Consumers would try to come back and hold someone accountable, but they would say, "Oh no, I don't have that data. Actually, I put it here. It's those guys. Go to them." And then so it's some third company somewhere. And that company would go, "Oh, no, actually, we get our stuff from these guys. Go to them." And you would just kind of keep going up this chain, right? Until usually it ended at some really big company that goes, "Try it, sue me." And I have all the lawyers to do this. So the consumer ended up kind of getting swindled out of it, because it's like, well, I'm not going to go up against, AWS or something like that. Amazon, please don't sue me because I use your name. So then what the government did was they created 3 categories: data collectors, data processors, data holders. And they said all of them are responsible for the security. And it's the responsibility of each one at each phase to ensure that the others he or she is interacting with is secure. So what that means now is you could own a hot dog stand on a corner, and I could come up to you and pay $2 with my credit card. And you use some big payment processor that, you're just a hot dog guy, right? But they get hacked and that data gets breached. I can come back to you as the hot dog stand and hold you partially responsible because you collected my data. You were the data requester because you asked me for the credit card. You asked me for a form of payment. I gave you a credit card because you have a credit card machine. So it behooves you to ensure that this stuff you're using, that you're requesting my data from, is secure. So it creates a very interesting landscape, right? Where now, I have to hold you accountable, right? But then practically, how much can I really hold you accountable, right? I mean, I can have you sign on the paperwork and do whatever, but really practically day to day, how much can I really hold you accountable? So really then from a risk perspective, what it comes down to, and again, we always go back to in the court of law, is and I'm no lawyer, by the way, we have to be able to show that you had all of your ducks in a row and you did a reasonable best to make sure everyone around you also had their ducks in a row. So that at the minimum, when everything comes rolling back downhill, we can say, okay, those guys did enough right. It makes sense. Reasonably, we can say that they did what they needed to do.
Gotcha. Now, I know that we've talked a lot about how all of this is shaping out, what's out there, and we probably spooked a couple of the audience listeners right now.
Sorry,
but,
guys.
Can you tell us, for those that are like, okay, well, we clearly have this issue, we clearly need to figure out what we need to do. What are resources that you rely on? What are things that you took into place, frameworks, et cetera, that for someone who's listening, say, man, I got to start somewhere. I got to figure it out. Where would you guide them, and what, if, from your opinion, they should start, or even a resource that they can go to just to keep themselves educated?
Yeah, so I mean, just personal recommendations on the low end. You've got the HIPAA, PCI type, compliances for the different industries and stuff like that. So look at your industry, and this isn't even just for MSPs. I mean, end clients too. Look at your industries and look at look at federal compliance for blank, whatever industry you're in, right? And there's generally frameworks for that. At the very, I would say, big top of it all is the NIST frameworks. There's half a dozen of them. I'm not going to bother them all out, but but the NIST frameworks are a pretty effective place to start. Actually, they're the best that we've seen so far as kind of an overarching thing that I think everybody for the most part can agree on. So that's a good place to start. The second place to start is then creating and starting to create a baseline of security. Well, one of the points that I also want to point out is that security is much easier to implement when you're building things up. It is much harder to implement after you've already built it up. It's like trying to build a brick house, but you're like, I'm going to stack all the bricks in the shape of a house, then we're going to go back in and concrete them all together. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what security is for businesses, right? Yeah. So put it in as you're building things up. Start from the ground up thinking, okay, we want to do a CRM, or we want to do this database, or this email server, or whatever the case, or this cloud, whatever the cloud is another thing that keeps me up at night. So we want to do this, and I'd love to talk about the cloud, by the way, if you don't mind. But, we want to do this. Let's build security into it as we're putting all of this together. Not, okay, we got all that done. Okay, now how do we secure it?
Gotcha.
No, I'm going to let you go because we're going to be running short on time. So you said you wanted to mention some things about the cloud. So.
Well, so when we early on in our company's history, one of the weirdest things was that we'd come into companies and we'd ask them, okay, what are you doing for your security? And they would go, oh no, it's cool, it's in the cloud. and we heard that from MSPs too, like, oh no, it's fine, we do everything in the cloud.
Right.
And I'm like, what does that mean, right? And look. All the cloud, now we don't hear it as much anymore, but it still comes up every once in a while. So I just kind of want to say this as a public service announcement. All the cloud means is other people's servers. So again, we go back to this big expansion of federal law and state compliances saying you're just as responsible for that, right? So, and I don't care how big it is. I mean, Microsoft, AWS, they've all had significant breaches as well in the past. So no one's immune to it. There is no silver bullet to this. So understand that, yes, the cloud has made it possible for us to scale exponentially with a click of a button, but it also has made us able to scale exponentially with the click of a button. It's made us able to put up brick houses with no concrete needed. So there's risks that come along with that. And I mean, I tell people, you read your Amazon cloud agreement, it'll tell you We're just giving you a sandbox,
Right.
effectively. It's your job to secure it.
Right.
And the 782 pages that they put
Yeah, it's on like 691. You should have gotten it.
It's the same thing.
in size 8.
Yeah,
we tell
Section
people
8.
about email with Microsoft, or about your Office
Yeah, they
365.
assume it's secure. Right? They assume that I use Outlook. That's secure. It's like no, you have no idea the breadth of Outlook can go and how they let you configure it. But if you don't know, you don't. And like I said, if you don't know, you just don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it looks like we're getting near wrap-up sign here. So, Dioly, first and foremost, again, thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Before we, wrap up, is there anything you think we didn't touch on that you'd like to say real quick? Or, no, wait, let me let you do that first.
So the last thing that I would touch on, I would say, is kind of a PSA on where the cyber is right now as we're seeing it. Okay, attacks are changing, people. They're becoming much more aggressive, and it's not about the money anymore.
Yep.
The part that is about the money has become business. I mean, just pure systematic business. They got it down to a T. Okay. The part that isn't about the money, we saw, for example, this year, as a result of recent events that everybody knows about, a 400% increase in cyber attacks that had a political motivation to it. So in other words, they're attacking you not to get paid, but to cause trouble, to cause damage. And those are the ones that kind of keep us up at night, because they're just coming in and saying, we just want to break everything. You can't pay us to leave. We want to come in and screw this up. So those kind of attacks are becoming more and more common. So cyber is becoming more aggressive. It's becoming more damaging. And again, you pair that with the increase in laws and the increase of the public's awareness of cyber, which means their willingness to now pursue repercussions if something does happen. The landscape is becoming more dangerous. So be aware of that.
Well said. Well said. And finally, since we're going to sign up, if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, just to pick your brain, continue the conversation, learn a little bit more, how can they do that?
LinkedIn is the best way to do that. So I'm on LinkedIn, Dioly Alexandre or Black Shield Cyber Inc. Vast majority of our people, you won't even see them listed on our LinkedIn because they're weird like that. But
Probably better for employee retention. So.
yeah. No one,
security
no one knows how big we are. But yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place to reach out to me. I'm always happy to give some insights to people and share the knowledge. We, as a company, we do a lot of gain of function research on malwares. We collect a lot of malwares. We keep a pretty significant database and statistics and all that stuff. It's not nearly as big as compared to a lot of other companies, but we like to think it's a very specialized set of data points because of the kind of clients that we work with. So LinkedIn's the best place to do that.
Okay, and his LinkedIn link will be in the show notes, so you can find it there. As we wrap up, Paco, any last words?
Nope. Since we're short on time, I'm just going to kick it over to Rick.
Okay, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Acronis. The Acronis Cyber Studio is awesome here, and we're privileged and glad to have the opportunity to be here and to present from here. As far as MSP Unplugged goes, you can tune in every Tuesday and Thursday. You can watch the video podcast on youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/MSP Unplugged. You can find us also on LinkedIn. I'm sorry. That's the hashtag MSP Unplugged. We need you to like, subscribe, hit the notification button so you'll know when the next time an episode is available. You can also take us on the go. We're on your favorite podcasters. We're on Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Again, for Paco and I and Dioly, we want to thank you for listening. We'll see you next time on MSP Unplugged.